Us to get a copy of the webinar video afterwards. So I've just started the recording. I expect we're going to see a number of people join a little bit late, but John will handle admitting them through. Just wanted to take a minute to say thank you for joining us for our MS Teams deep dive. I'm really excited to show you the power of Microsoft Teams and what it can do. Before we go too far, I'll give John a moment just to introduce himself and the Spot webinar team. Go
Thanks,
ahead,
Mara.
John.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you everyone taking their time to join us today. I know it's always challenging to get some time set aside to do these kind of events, but we are very excited to have everyone here. Do a quick introduction on my side. As you can see, Director of Sales there at Spot Solutions. I've been with the company for over 6 years now. From a SharePoint M365 perspective, we've been doing this for over 20 plus years. So very familiar with this. We've got an amazing team here. Obviously, when it comes to MS Teams, there's a ton of experience. So I'm excited to listen to what we go through today, and happy to keep an eye on some questions as we go through it as well. If you want to use the Q&A tab there, feel free to jump in and join us as well. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, I have a loud microphone for everyone. So if you do have a question that you'd like to talk out, please unmute yourself and let us know. We'll stop at certain points throughout to see if there are any questions. My name is Tamara Hegan. I have been working with SharePoint and the M365 environment generally for over 20 years. And I'm going to walk you through how Microsoft Teams can be used, configured, and integrated with the other systems that you may have. Our other webinar team members who often join us during these webinars are Rafe Bin Ali and Arash Ajani. However, today they're not going to be with us. It's going to be John and I walking you through this exciting world of Microsoft Teams. So let's get started. What is Microsoft Teams? It's collecting and collaborating. Now, the Microsoft Teams platform started as the successor or the replacement for Skype and was meant to support meetings and collaborations. So it offered video meetings, real time chat, both public and private, optional calling voice features. Over time, we evolved Teams and it became more of a collaboration platform, linking to SharePoint online libraries for your file collaboration, providing access when configured to different apps that you're allowed to use, and allowing you to add tabs for Microsoft Planner or other Microsoft 365 and SharePoint integrations, as well as a host of workflows and notifications. Now, when we talk about things like optional voice calling features, a lot of people don't realize that Microsoft is in the telephone business, but it is. The Microsoft Teams platform allows, if you choose to license it, calling plans that can be your full voice over IP solution. And when you do choose to engage in calling plans, you can set up all of that information in the Microsoft Teams Admin Center. So we'll walk through how that works. But Microsoft Teams can be used without a calling plan. If you don't have a calling plan and you're using Microsoft Teams, then the calls that you can make are based on the meetings that you've created and the contacts that you've got internally and externally. So once you've had a meeting with a contact, you can always call them or video call them again in the future. So Skype has been depreciated. There aren't that many people still using Skype or Skype for Business, but it really was the predecessor to what became a much more full and robust platform under MS Teams banner. Now, when we're building a team in Microsoft Teams, it's more than just giving a name. You want to make sure that you understand what the team is going to be used for so that you can configure that team properly to meet the needs of the group. You need to know who's going to be managing or maintaining that team on a regular basis because team owners have different permissions and responsibilities than simple members of the team. Then who are the members of the team? And this can include both internal and external users if appropriate. So keep that in mind. If you want to have a customer support team in Microsoft Teams, you might invite some third party individuals to collaborate, on the platform, but they wouldn't have any access to any other information in your environment. Or you may keep it completely in-house and make sure that if it's a private team, only the members of the team are that you've designated are able to access it and interact with the features. Or if you make it a public team, anybody inside your organization can find that team and choose to join and then interact with those features. And then what apps or tabs will be in use on that team. And you'll understand what I mean by apps and tabs as we move through the webinar today. Most of the content we're going to be looking at today is going to be actually live in system. So we're going to have some interactive opportunities to ask questions and kind of dig into your individual use cases. So workflow and app integrations with Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is a fully integrated system. It integrates with the Power Platform and accommodates the development of workflows or integrations with Power Apps that send notifications or take actions within your Microsoft Team environment. In this demo, we're also going to review the different templates available to create Teams workflows and how you might be able to modify those over time. Now, where we're going to take a look at that, our webinar coming up on Microsoft Power Apps and Microsoft Power Automate will do more of a deep dive in how to configure the workflows. Our goal is to understand how they can integrate with Teams. So, without further ado, we're going to take a look. So first off, I think everybody's sort of aware of what a Teams environment looks like. So this is a training team that I have. In every team that you have, you'll have the name of the team and a general channel. This is the main channel that all the members have access to and that everybody is working with. Then you can create additional channels, either public or private, to drill down conversations or to talk about a subset of your information. In this session, we're going to actually walk through the creation of a brand new Microsoft team and how to configure that team to meet the needs of your organization and the group of people that the team is being created for. So this is the Microsoft Teams Administration Center. I access the Teams Administration Center through the general Microsoft O365 Admin Center. From that admin center, you're going to say show all, and you'll see the different admin centers for components of the Microsoft 365 environment. It's important for you to note that the users that you see within the main Microsoft 365 admin center are the same types of users and the same individuals that you'll be allocating roles to within the Teams admin center. So these are interconnected, and it's just important to remember that. So when I come to the Microsoft Admin Center team dashboard, I can see a number of tools right here. So the first one is Teams, and so this is where I can actually manage and see all of the Microsoft Teams that I have, whether they are public or private, and I can see how many channels they have and other information. I, in my own, have a total of 135 users that have access to the team environment. And of those, 82 are internal users, which means that they're directly employed by or have an account with Spot Solutions. I have 53 guests who have access to various teams, and those guests are external to our organization, but have been invited to collaborate with us. I can see all the different teams here. Now, I'm going to actually create a team and we're going to walk through that process. But before we do that, I want to take a moment just to familiarize you with the rest of the options available here within the Teams Admin Center. So managing teams is where I can create, edit, archive, or delete various teams. Team setting allows me to manage the general type of integration and file storage within my organization for my teams. So I've turned on the ability to send a notification to a user's activity feed when we think that they actually would benefit from one of the feeds within or one of the teams that are public within the environment. And then we have tagging. Tagging happens within SharePoint Online to documents, but you can actually also apply tags to chat conversations and other components within your team's environment as well. So in our case, globally, the owner of the team can manage tags. You can have that be owners and members, only owners, or we simply don't enable tagging or classification of chats and content. Team owners who are able to change who can manage tags, and then we can have suggested tags. So here's where we can actually add specific tags that we want to suggest that managers might use on a regular basis. So confidential as an example, but you'll want to spell it right. And then what kind we have custom tags available, and we can apply those tags in different ways. In addition to the tagging component, here's where we look at our email integration. So users can send emails to a channel email address, yes or no. So every time you create a Microsoft team, three things are created at the same time, and people often don't realize it. The first thing that's created when you create a Microsoft team is the team itself. You've got your general channel, it creates the team and a general channel, and you have posts and files available. The second thing that it creates is a SharePoint online site that is associated with the file structure. So when you're looking at files, you may think that those are stored in Microsoft Teams, but they're not. They're actually stored in a SharePoint site that is associated with your team. So there's my training example, spot on SharePoint. I can see that it's a Teams connected site because it has that logo. And I can see that it's in general. That tells me these are the documents that come from the general channel within my Teams. Now, in addition to that, SharePoint site, the third thing that is created is a group O365 group mailbox. That means that your team, Spot on SharePoint, actually has an email that is associated with it. So in this email integration, we're identifying if we're going to allow emails to be sent to a channel email address and actually show up as part of that channel. And then finally, files, we're looking at what kinds of sharing options we want available from our Files tab. So by default, files are stored in SharePoint Online. That's just how that works. But you can also activate Citrix files, Dropbox, Box, Google Drive, or Ignite, and add tabs to files that are stored in those storage areas to your MS team if and when you enable those items. So by being able to do that, you really give yourself the option to say, look, I can use SharePoint for content that's shared in Teams going forward, but I have, for example, Ignite is often used by marketing departments to store massive amounts of approved images. And if I have a marketing team, I might want to be able to just have a quick tab link directly into that Ignite content and keep that separate from the other types of content I have. Now, you've got the organization tab for users, so that allows them to see others in the organizational hierarchy. And then in terms of devices, if we want to apply multi-factor authentication, we can actually say, okay, well, if they have a secondary form, then they can have full access, partial access, or no access. And I can require a PIN for people who are outside of my organization to access the Teams meetings or the Microsoft Teams that I use. And keep in mind that these settings impact a number of activities, not just the teams themselves, but also how people create and leverage meetings with Microsoft Teams. We've got, do we want a scope directory to use Exchange Address Policy Book? So that sounds really technical, and it is. This is really only useful to your organization if you're not moved to an Exchange online and you're still using on-premise Exchange. Um, and that basically just allows people to search using an Exchange address book policy instead of just a regular search of the address book. And so policies may restrict which particular users show up in a search. For example, if you have service accounts or generic accounts and you don't want those accounts to show up in Teams because they're not being monitored for messages or chats that might be sent, you could set a policy that would restrict which kinds of users were visible when you were searching. And then finally, do you want to have role-based chat permissions? So that determines, and we don't turn that on, we trust our employees, but sometimes you may have a very large group of people and you want to sort of say different roles have a different amount of autonomy or a different level of supervision when they're using the chat functions and features in Microsoft Teams. Teams policies, and everybody starts with a global org-wide default, allow you to control what settings or features are available to users whenever they use a team and team channels. So the global policy is fairly standard. I think everybody will recognize it. Um, we've got they can create private channels, they can create shared channels, they can invite external users to a shared channel, and they can join external shared channels. So that's just the basic policy. And we'll walk through creating policies once we've gone through this overview here. You've got team templates. So these are templates Microsoft has provided that put into your team a specific set of apps and tabs based on the type of work. And as you can see, they've got quite a few different policies that they might want. So for example, on Bank Branch, the policy template says, okay, they're going to get these channels: general, an announcement channel that has a bulletins app, hurdles, customer meeting channel with a shared calendar, approvals requests, coaching, skills development, customer complaints with the customer image app, and the fun stuff with the ideas app. So if I were to use this Bank Branch template, all the users would see all of these tabs across the top of their channel. So there are a number of these pre-built that you might want to experiment with or play with to see if they actually meet your needs, or you can actually create your absolutely own team template and apply your own tabs to that team. Now, template policies, again, you've got an org-wide policy that basically says these are the viewable templates that are allowed. And if I want, I can hide some of these templates so that they're not usable by my organization. So I can say I don't want a hospital template to be used. So I just want to get it out of the way so people don't accidentally pick that template. Pardon me. Team update policies. This is really only relevant to the policy for updating users and previewing new Teams features. So basically, a public preview is allowed and it's controlled by Microsoft. So the cloud controls it. And for the most part, that sort of an update policy is pretty standard, and there's not a lot of reason to change it. Now, the Teams upgrade settings is really just related to whether or not you still have some users using Skype. So in the coexistence mode, we're in Teams only, and we can't change that setting anymore because we've fully moved over to a Teams environment and removed the depreciated Skype application. But if you still had Skype for Business in use in your organization and you were going through a phased rollout of Microsoft Teams, then you could have Skype for Business and Teams together in coexistence mode. And you could actually notify your Skype for Business users automatically when they open Skype for Business that an upgrade to Microsoft Teams is available. And, for users to join a Skype for Business meeting, we've kept it as Skype for Business because um, some of our clients still use Skype for Business. So when I attend one of their meetings, even though I'm doing it through the Teams interface, we're using Skype for Business app opens for that. So that's what you see here in the in the admin center under Teams. The next part you'll see is users. And keep in mind, these users are coming from our users over here. So our active and guest users. So these are the users, but this is where we see what are the user policies that are assigned to a particular user from the Microsoft Teams perspective. So here I can look at what policies have been assigned to myself, looking at my user profile, and I can see most of the time I have good quality. I've had a couple poor quality meetings. I can see all of my information and my policies that I've been assigned. And I've got all of the global default policies that we have chosen to put into place. So you can actually see and change by clicking Edit Policies to change any of those policies for individual users. So in cases where you do have some users whose policies might be different, you can set that right here in Manage Users. Guest access allows you to identify how guests can interact with your Teams environment, right? So if you don't turn on allow guest access to Teams, you can't invite them to Teams at all. So you may want that on, or you may decide that you don't want people in your Microsoft Teams area that are guests, are not employees of your organization. I want to note for anybody who may have employees who subcontract or are not issued an identity by your organization, like an @spotsolutions.com, but access your content with their personal emails. And this is pretty common in construction and some of those types of industries. You can invite them as guests with their external email address, and you don't need in that case to apply any licensing or pay for any licensing for that individual. But if you do take that approach, you'll want to allow guest access in Teams so that they are able to access any Teams that are relevant to them. Now, in terms of calling settings for guests, this says a guest can make a private call. But because our organization doesn't have a calling plan, they're not actually creating a call in a voice over IP scenario the way that you normally would. They would be able to start a meeting from their team. So when you're in a team, you can see right up here this meet. So that allows you to start a meeting or schedule a meeting directly from a team, and the individuals from that team would receive notification that a meeting had started for them to join. And so that would be the way that guests would be able to use calling. Now, in terms of meetings, do we want to allow them to have video? Do we want to allow screen sharing? Um, and do we want the Meet Now to be turned on for guests as well? And then managing what kind of messages guests can send. So they can edit send messages, delete sent messages, and maybe I want to change that. I don't want my guests to be able to delete the things that they send. I don't want them to delete chat so that a history of our chat is available for employees. I have chat turned on, and I'm allowing GIF-any in conversation. So that means that they can add a GIF or a little animated image to the conversation. Now, I actually get to decide what rating that is. So if it's strict, it's a really strict and it makes sure that there's nothing at all off color. If it's allow all content, then whether it's off color or not, it's allowed. And moderate uses sort of a movie style grading standard to say what content is acceptable in the environment. And then can we have memes? Can we have stickers? And immersive reader for messaging. So this is really important if you either have employees or guests who have visual impairment and require accommodation. The immersive reader, if they click the button, will actually have a computer voice read to them what is written on the page or describe for them what an image is. So it's definitely one of those accommodations. And then you have your external access. You confirm any changes and those are saved. And then we go to external access. So in this Teams and Skype for Business, we're not restricting domains, but you can actually allow all external domains or you can allow only specific domains. So what does that mean? My domain is spotsolutions.com. I could say I'm only going to allow PHS Community Services .ca, and I'm only going to allow techresources.com. Those are the two domains that I'm allowed to share with externally. And so I can have guests, but only guests that have email addresses that end there. Or I could block only specific domains and say, under absolutely no circumstances can the biker club down the street have access, or under no circumstances can a competitor, so leadcore.com, can't have access, or something like that. Or block all external domains, which prevents external access sharing. And then Teams accounts not managed by the organization. So people in my organization can communicate with Teams users from another organization. So what that means is, for example, if I want to, in my chat, I have Scott Douglas, who's a guest. He is outside of my organization, not part of Spot Solutions. But because of the way that our Teams is allowed, I can actually have a threaded chat discussion with Scott on my Teams platform without actually having to be invited to his Teams and chat there or switch between multiple team areas. So if you do have guests that you might want to collaborate with or have use messaging and chat to have quick conversations with, then you'll want to make sure that that's turned on. And then do I allow users in my organization to communicate with users who are still on Skype? And we've said yes. Now, I will say that probably 80% of the organizations that I work with now have already moved away from Skype, but some haven't. Now, in terms of Teams devices, I'm not going to go through every single one of these. I'm just going to kind of at a high level explain this tab. Teams devices are for if you want to create in your organization a video conferencing room. So you want to put in tools and features in your conference room for video calling. And so you can click on the store and actually look at purchasing all kinds of Teams integrated phones and video and systems in order to be able to leverage those team rooms. So all of this is basically dealing with, smart TVs and panels, phones and devices for rooms that run on Windows or on Android, and there's access to the store there. So if you do want to create a Teams conference room, this area is how you set that up. Now, Teams apps is where we decide what kind of applications are initially available on everybody's team. So when we look at managing apps, we're going to have a couple policies that apply to one or more people. So right now, our first all apps, these are all of the different apps that are available to be added within our environment to a team if we want. And we can actually upload new apps. So those may be custom applications that were developed by you or purchased by you from a third party. There's also the app store. So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of apps that you can integrate directly. And a lot of these apps actually have other publishers besides Microsoft. So you can see which ones are Microsoft, but then you've got William Wallace with the App Review Bot and AppSpace and other types of partners or vendors that have so ArcGIS mapping from Irisi, etc. So these are the different types of things that you can allow. Now, not only can you upload new ones, but you can see I've got 2010 apps, and I could select one and I could actually block that app or add it to a particular team. So if I said add to team, it would ask me to search for which team. And I can see my spot on SharePoint, and I could choose to add that app directly to that team. So that's one of the ways that we can add apps to a team in Microsoft Teams using the Admin Center. Now, some custom apps, when you upload a custom app, will require some approvals. And you can also have subscriptions. So I don't actually have a purchase subscription to an app, but I can. I can also see my organization-wide app settings from here. So if I click on that, I can see what kind of policy I have around apps. So we have tailored apps, third-party apps are allowed, new third-party apps are allowed, custom apps are allowed, and then users can request an app. But we don't actually have that turned on because we don't have an app request policy or process set up. So I can actually redirect that if I want. Permissions policies handle how apps will be used. So the global org-wide setting is allow Microsoft apps, allow third-party apps, and allow custom apps. And each of those can be allowed, allow specific, block specific, or block all. Now, the setup policy is interesting. This is where you can actually customize for different types of employees which apps they see on their Teams interface. So when we're talking about apps, these are the apps. This is your default global apps. It's organization wide. So users can pin apps, so I can move where the app sits if I want. And it shows me which apps have already been pinned and will automatically be available. And I can actually move those if I want to see them in different spots from activity, chat, Teams, calendar, calling, and files. And you can see that's exactly what I have here. Now, if I go back, I can actually see this first line worker, and the apps that they see are different. They have activity, shifts, chat, and calling. And so you can actually create your own setup policy for the apps that you want to show when you push this out to your employees. And then there's the customize the store. So there is an app store. So, we don't want to see the logo, don't show the logo mark, use the Teams app default theme background, and do we have a text color of what we want? So we've got all of those tools within. And when we create our team, we're going to be creating a custom app policy there as well. Now, in terms of meetings, this is where we handle all of the audio and video conferencing meeting policies. So we've basically don't have a toll-free number because we don't have any calling. So we don't use that for audio conferencing. But under meeting policies, we have a number of different types that we can use. So when we look at our meeting rules, we've said you can privately schedule meetings. They're not all public. You can meet now for private. Channel meeting scheduling, so I can go to Microsoft Teams and schedule a meeting for my channel. I can meet now in a channel, like I showed you earlier. We have the Outlook add-in turned on so that we're creating the meetings in our email, in Outlook calendars, and they're automatically synchronized between my Microsoft Teams and my Microsoft Outlook. We can allow for the registration for meetings and restrict, is it everybody or only people in my organization? We have attendance reports so that we understand who's come to the meeting. Um, Everybody is in the attendance report, but participants can opt out, or no one but participants can opt in, or everyone. And then a summary showing everything that's happening. And then meeting and joining in the lobby. So anonymous users can join the meeting. Anonymous users can start a meeting is off. I don't want somebody who's not part of my organization to start the meeting. And so because I'm not letting an anonymous user start the meeting, they'll sit in the waiting room until the meeting is started by people in my organization. And then we've got meeting engagement. So we've got the meeting chat on for everyone. We have question and answer turned on, and we also have the ability to react. So when we want to react, we can, in our meeting, clap, heart, thumbs up, etc. So that becomes part of how we interact inside the meetings themselves. And then who can present and share content. So you'll want to look at all of these and make sure that it makes sense what you're allowing people to do. And typically, Microsoft's default is fairly open. It's allowing people to do most things. Now we have meeting recordings. We've turned off the recordings automatically expire because what we found is we record a lot of different kinds of sessions. And if you weren't quick thinking and move that into another location in your environment, if you just left it in the default recordings folder that you'll see automatically pops up in your OneDrive when you're using recordings, they could disappear and you can't get them back. And then do you want to store recordings outside of your country or region? So we have set up our Microsoft 365 environment with Canada only data centers. So that this is sort of referencing to that. Within the M365 environment, you can have no specification for the data center where your data resides, and that it may be in Canada, the United States, Europe, etc. Or you can have dedicate a country or region. If you want your recordings stored outside your country or region, then you can turn that on and set where that's going to go. That may be useful for some individuals in the United States who perhaps didn't want their recordings subject to the Patriot Act, in which case, if they turn that on, then their recordings are stored outside of the United States and not subject. And then transcripts. So if we want transcripts of the meetings, live events, voicemails, etc. And live captions. So we don't have live captioning turned on all the time, but organizers and co-organizers could turn on live captioning for a meeting, a webinar, or an event if they wanted. And then you've got your audio and video content. So most of this is going to stay at the defaults. We're certainly not local broadcasting and some of those items. So just keep that in mind. And then if you want to upgrade to premium, Teams Premium, you can actually add watermarks to videos or shared content that will prevent users from being able to share them without proper credit. And then you can customize your meeting policies and your meeting settings. So anonymous users can join and they can interact with apps. And in the email invitations, you can actually set what these logo, a legal disclaimer, a help UFO, URL, and a footer show up. So you can actually really customize and professionalize how the meeting invites you send from Teams go. And then there's some network settings in terms of ports. Live events are a meeting set up by Microsoft Teams that allow up to 5,000 attendees, but it disables a great deal of the attendees' ability to interact. So this is really meant for a push. A lot of people will do this for an AGO, like an AORM, annual general meetings, or other very large live events where the presenters will be presenting to the group, but the participants will mostly just be watching. So you can set up your policies. So yes, you can schedule live events. Do we want a transcription for attendees? who can schedule them, and do we record those events? And then if you want to create new live settings where we actually leverage Microsoft to produce the live event, we can actually do video distribution. And then meeting templates, these are just premium tools to give you additional templates that you can use when you're setting up those types of events. And then meeting template policies. So they don't have very many specific custom, and a lot of these are now in the premium as opposed to the defaults. Messaging policies are similar as well. There's really just one, and it's org wide. You can customize it if you want, but it's basically, owners can delete sent messages. So we don't want an owner of the team to be able to delete someone else's sent message, so we turn that off. Users can delete their own sent messages, chat messages. They can edit a message that they sent. Users can decide if they want to read receipt. Chat is on, and you'll notice they tell you sometimes when this is the same as a setting that's somewhere else within the Teams interface, so you don't have it different. So these are all the sort of chat stickers, previews of URLs, translating messages, urgent messages are sent with priority, allow chats and channels, so you can create voice messages in chats and channels, but not on mobile display. And, can we remove users, text predictions, suggest replies, and restricted permissions for chat rules. So that handles all of the messaging policies within your chat. Voice is only relevant to you if you choose to get a voice calling plan, in which case you'll actually have all of the different phone numbers, provider, location, and you'll have to actually assign where the emergency address for that person is. That's because as a voice over IP, if somebody called 911 from that phone number, 911 would not be able to see where they are. So you actually have to apply, whether it's an office or a specific location, an emergency address for services to come to, and then assign that phone number to an employee. So this manages your phone system as well as operators and how operators connect, calling policies, and direct routing. So that's all around that. And then you have your location. So this is your emergency addresses. Again, this is mostly related to whether or not you're using voice for the emergency address. But then you've got your network topography. So if you want to define multiple regions, because you have multiple centers, maybe Calgary, Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto, you can set your topography and set your network locations for each of those regions and their IP addresses. You have enhanced encryption, which allows you to potentially encrypt policies that allow you to encrypt end to end. So I can not enable it or not enabled, but users can enable it. And then end-to-end meeting encryption for meetings is a premium feature. And finally, what you'll see here is the policy packages. So these are basically taking all those other pieces and pulling them together to create a single package of policies that can be applied to a whole group of users. So they've given you some policies out of the box that they think will meet the needs of these kinds. So for example, a primary school student has an education messaging policy, meeting policy, app setup, calling, and live events. And if I look at the app setup policy, they just have activity, calendar, and teams. So in that way, you can create all your policies and then package them together in a way that will allow, make it a lot simpler to manage and maintain. So before we actually get into creating now our team, does anybody have any questions about this sort of deep dive overview into the Teams Admin Center? Okay, great. So we're going to come in here to managing teams and we're going to add a new team. So we're going to call this team the webinar team. And I can add a description here. Now, you don't have to provide a description, but providing a description is going to be useful to make sure that the people in your organization understand the purpose that this team is intended for and don't start using this team for something different than what you had originally intended. Now, team owner, I am a team owner. I'm going to make John, Arash, and Rafe. So we are team owners, and what's my level of privacy? If I make it a private team, then only people that the owners invite to the team will be able to see or interact with the team. If I make it a public team, then anyone in my organization, when they're looking at different teams, can stumble across it and choose to join that team. So often I make employee center or employee relation, not so much employee relations directly, but sort of that employee central, a shared team where maybe they can chat about upcoming events or Christmas parties or things like that. That I would make public. Everybody's allowed to see it, um, but I can make it private as well. So once I hit apply, that's going to create the new team, but it's only going to create the baseline of that team. What I need to do then is look at how I want to set that team up. So here's my webinar team, and I'm going to click on edit. And so I've got this little logo, I've got my name. Now I'm seeing some additional features that I didn't see in the creation of the team, and it's important to know that they're here. So member permissions. This is where I'm going to decide for this team what members versus owners can do. So members can go ahead and edit sent messages, but we don't want them deleting it. We don't want owners deleting sent messages either. We can add and edit channels. I don't want members to add or edit channels uh, or to delete channels. And I don't want members to be adding or removing tabs. I want the owners to add the tabs in and the members to interact with them. So, and maybe I can let them delete their own sent message, but I don't want team owners deleting messages sent by members. Mentions. Am I going to allow mentions in Teams? That's an at John Iwanis, and that would automatically notify him that he was mentioned in his feed activity. So I do want at mentions, and I'm good for that in Teams messages and in channel messages. So that's fine. Mentions are good. I've got my member permissions set up. My guest permissions now. Guests can add and edit channels. Guests can add or delete channels, and I don't want that. So we'll leave that as is. And then I get to my fun settings. So I'm going to allow GIFs, stickers, and memes. I'm going to keep my content rating at moderate. I'm not comfortable with a free-for-all. There might be some very off-color and not professional items there, but we're a little bit less formal, so we don't need to get too strict. So now I'm going to apply all of that to my team. And when I click on here, I now see a little item. So here's the email address, webinarteam@spotsolutions.com. So you remember earlier we were saying, can people be allowed to send emails? So I can open in Teams, send an email, um, and look at that. And again, here under edit, I can see all those same permissions that we looked at from the previous edit screen. But here now I can add additional members. So I see these people are owners, and now I'm going to add Cy and Brenna and Tanya. So I'm going to add some individuals to my team. So once I apply that, they've become and they're members, and I can at any time change permissions from member to owner. So I've added a couple additional members to my team, and now I want to look at the channels. I've got that general channel that we have for chatting, but I want to add another channel to my team. This channel is going to be specific to presentation development. I can make it a standard channel, a shared channel, or a private channel. A private channel, I will have to specifically identify who is allowed, and only members of the team can be added to the private channel. So if you want to have a channel where your senior VP has access to your marketing reports, they still have to be a part of the marketing team before they can be invited to the private channel. So keep that in mind. Standard channel is just like general. Because this is a private team, the standard channel will allow any member of the Microsoft team to access that channel. A shared channel allows me to share this channel with people who are not part of the Microsoft team. So I could have, for example, a finance team, and they have an accounts payable, accounts receivable, uh, and year end channels, and month end is a shared channel. So finance is a private team, but accounts receivable is a shared channel, and I invite the project managers to that channel so that they can review the AP invoice or AR invoices and say, yep, that's right. So I can choose if I want that channel to be anything different. And once I apply that, it will generate that channel for me in here. Now, in terms of settings, I can edit these. So right now, these are the same settings that we looked at before. So I don't need to change them. I've got no desire to. So here I can actually just go open in Teams, and it's actually going to open my brand new webinar team right here in Microsoft Teams. So at this moment, there isn't very much going on. I've got my presentation development and my general channel. I have no posts, and I see that I don't have any files yet. If I open that in SharePoint, I will see that a brand new site has been created for me related to Webinar Teams. It's connected to my Microsoft Teams channel, and I can see my documents. Now, if I go back one, I'm going to see here are the two different channels that I have. So I've got documents. If I put files here into this space, which I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to pull over some samples. I can put those right in here. And then I can go to this team channel, which is still part of my webinar Teams. And I can put some content over there as well. And there we've got our first item. I'm going to reply. Great. I can @mention, so it's going to give me that. And I can even add some GIFs. So here you go. That's that GIFany. This is that moderate. I can search for something, party, and I can pick my GIF, and there it is, dancing around doing his thing. So I've got a little bit of that, but now I want to add some tabs. So up here, I can actually search for what kind of content I would like to add as tabs across the top. So I can look at it in data-driven decisions, productivity, policies, etc., or I can find my own. So I'm going to actually add a channel calendar. And I'm going to add that. And so now I have a calendar here that's related just to this webinar team channel, and we can actually look at this in different ways and work with this as our calendar right here. I can also add a SharePoint site. So for example, if I wanted to add something from SharePoint, do I want to add it directly from content at my webinar team, or I want to add it from a different location? So I'm going to say a different location, and it's going to ask me to paste in a link. So I have a demo site in SharePoint that I want to use. So I'm going to paste that in and save that. And now I have access to all of the content and information from watching a video directly, seeing news and announcements, and I can interact with all of my content. Now we've added and modified from here, and there's more that you can do. You can look for specific types of apps. So for example, that's not here, but so I can go and add project, add Power Automate. So I can add these items as tabs into my team and set this up for full collaboration for that team to leverage and use. So this is setting up a new project for me. First one in my org to use this particular app, and it's going to set that up for me. Now, this deals with how we create and customize our actual new Microsoft team, how we actually have, and here's the presentation channel all ready to go. Move some content in. And there we go. And I've got all that set up. Now, I might want to also have these apps be different for a particular user or group of users. So that's where I've created my webinar, and now I'm going to actually go into Teams apps and app setup policies. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a policy. I'm going to name this subcontractor. So they're not going to be allowed to upload custom apps, and I'm going to decide which apps I want them to have. So they can have their calendar, but we don't want a meeting like a calling. We want them to have activity, chat, Teams, calendar, and files. And then I'm going to add an app. So we use Jabber for calling. I don't, but some people do. So I might want to add the Jabber app. I could also look for different types of apps. And I can add pretty much any of those apps you saw on that Manage App list. So I've added Jabber. So that's right there. And I can move that up or down. And add additional apps. So I can add, and actually that was not a bad one to do. So I can add Adobe Acrobat, Adobe Sign Government. So I'm going to add Acrobat app and move that up. So I've got that set up and I'm going to select save. So now that I've got this subcontractor app, I can actually manage the users. So I can bulk assign or assign users to that policy. So if I were to add somebody, I could look for, let's see, what's a good one to pick? So I can add Anthony and I could actually assign him that policy. Now, I don't actually want to assign that policy to Anthony because he's not going to want to use those apps in this particular instance. But I think there we go. So I'm going to use the Spot Solution Scanner and I can apply that. So it will take time to have effect and the changes can't be rolled back immediately. So the Spot Solution Scanner, if it logs into Microsoft Teams, once the policy, and typically it may take a while, it's typically between 15 minutes to a half hour, but if you're applying the policy to a large number of users, it may take longer to do. I generally recommend applying app policies or global policies sort of end of day Friday, start that process going. And that way, by Monday morning, the majority of your team are going to be fully set up and they're going to be able to see all of that. So I set that setup policy. If I come to policy packages, I can actually uncheck. Don't want to have any of them. I can assign group packages. So I can select a package. Not sure why that's not letting me do that right now. Ah, they've changed it. I see. So they've decided that creating your own custom policy packages is now a premium feature. That's a change that happened within the last 45 days. So right now you can leverage any of the default policy packages. And if you want to, so for example, small, medium business user without voice. So when I look at that policy package, this is their setup. They've got activity, chat, calendar, bookings, approvals, tasks, and files. So you can assign policy packages in that way, or you can assign your individual setup policies and your individual messaging policies. So here I can actually add a new messaging policy if I want. And we looked at what those messaging policies looked like, but I can create an additional messaging policy and I can assign that to specific users. So the kiosk policy is about a user who's at sort of a mall kiosk or something. What can they do? So they don't do private meeting scheduling, but they've got a Meet Now and Meet Now in channel meetings, and that's their basic policy setup. So you can update or modify, create your own, and then apply those to the individual users within your space. Now, before I move on to what I think is perhaps one of the most interesting parts of our session today, does anybody have any questions about how this works or anything that I've sort of showed with you today? Because the next thing I'm going to do is sort of talk about how Microsoft Teams can integrate with Power Platform, specifically Power Automate and Power Apps. Okay. And you'll note, by the way, that you'll see up here all of the different activities that you've had separate from chats in your team and your calendar and files. When this file says Microsoft Teams, it's actually pulling the files that you've leveraged or shared in Microsoft Teams from their SharePoint online locations. And then, of course, there's your cloud storage of OneDrive or anything that you've downloaded. All right. So let's take a look at what we can do with Power Automate and Microsoft Teams. So here is my Power Automate home screen. I'm not going to go too deep into how to create and the complexities of developing workflows because we'll have a deep dive webinar on that. What I want to focus on here is how this can integrate into your Microsoft Teams environment. So the first thing I want to look at are the templates. There are several hundred, if not 1,000 templates that have been provided, not all from Microsoft. Many have. For example, that's from Microsoft. This is by the Microsoft Power Automate community, so developers that are leveraging it, different people who have created templates in Power Automate, I should say, and want to share them with others to make it a little bit easier. So here, if I go MS Teams, or actually if I just say Teams, you get quite a few more, I can all of a sudden start to see that there's already a number of predefined spaces that I can leverage and get some integration. So for example, post a message in Teams when a planner task is complete. So if I have a planner, so if I go in here and I actually want to add create a new plan. So I've just created a new planner. It's a Kanban board, so to do. So these are ideas. And I can add a task. And then I can move that task through. So I've got this task. It belongs to Arash. It's approved for development. And I can update that card with labels if I want, or open it and add checklist items. And get that going. Now, so there's a task. Now, if I have a task over here, so that's been assigned, and you'll notice all the people I have available to assign to tasks in this planner are members of my team. I can't assign tasks to people who have not been invited to my team because it's a private team. All right, so the purpose here is we're going to have this in our team, and now I can actually have something like this, post a planner message. So what's the group? My group is going to be probably at the bottom, webinar team, the plan identifier, webinar development tasks, post as, do I want to post as a Flowbot, a user, or a virtual agent? which is virtual power agents is in preview. I'm going to go with a flow bot, post in the channel. Which team do I want to notify? So I could notify a different team when webinar team completed something. So for example, I could notify the sales and marketing team. Post in there when the webinar team has completed a development task. So my sales and marketing team knows that we've done that. But for the purposes here, we're just going to do that. Which channel do we want to? Into general, message, planner task title blank is complete. Please and I can add in any of this other content. Again, I'm not going to focus too much on building complex workflows here, but I've built this workflow. It's turned on. And so now I'm actually going to come in here and I'm going to identify that that task is complete. So that's now listed as complete. And in my workflow, it'll take a moment while it goes through and notifies the workflow that it's been done. And then it's going to post for me. And typically a workflow, it's not instant. It's going to take a couple minutes to get the notification, send the notification, and pop that into my teams. So that's an example of how you can kind of set up a way to have different tasks or actions. So this is just a message in Teams when Planner task is completed. But I also have the ability to create a task in Planner from a form and then post a message in Teams, right? We can start to do a lot of automation and handoffs and make sure that everybody's aware of what's happening from that spot in Teams. Another one here is post a message to Teams when an email arrives in an Office 365 Outlook. So a shared email box, getting that note in Teams because you may not be looking at those O365 group mailboxes all the time. And unless you subscribe, they don't come into your own inbox. So that's a way to get a notification when you do something. Post messages when a new item task is created in Planner so people know, hey, you've just got a task you need to take a look at. And a number of these types of daily messages to Microsoft Teams with planner tasks that are due tomorrow. So setting up schedules so that you can leverage your Microsoft Teams as that central place to communicate with the group and kind of pull everything that you need into one space. But it's really leveraging your whole Microsoft 365 environment. It's not just one thing, it's many things. So you can leverage a lot of these things, building a poll, praising individuals, learning different kinds of tools and information. All of that stuff can kind of come together to build a modern digital workspace that connects to your Outlook, connects to your SharePoint, connects your workflows and notifications, and make sure that people are always able to do and see what they need to do. Now we're at 11:19. We have about 10 minutes left. The remainder of this session is set aside for questions. So I'd like to really open the floor. Everybody on the call, you're should be allowed, or I'll make sure that your mic is allowed. Does anybody have any specific questions or any scenarios that they have in their own business that they'd like to understand different approaches or different ways that they could be done? All right. Well, I'm not hearing a lot of questions, and I haven't seen too many items of concern. So why don't I hand it over to John for this? Oh, yes, I will send you all a copy of this recording. And if you did join late, the recording did start on time, so you'll be able to see what you missed in the beginning. Absolutely, Ali. Thank you. John, do you want to just close out
Sure,
for
yeah.
us?
I'm just going to do a quick reminder. I know some of you jumped in a little bit later, but again, my name is Johnny Wanis, Director of Sales at Spot Solutions. I just kind of put a little piece on my end towards the end here, just related to MS Teams. I know everyone has different experience with it, some more than others, but please do reach out to us when it comes to, expanding on what Tamara shared today, because obviously there's quite a bit there. It's an extremely powerful tool, and I think we can help provide guidance. What I will do is also in our little chat, I'll give you our link to our website, which gives you an area within the site where you can actually connect with us, and we can provide some consulting. If it's just, how should I set up governance, which is a pretty big piece within it, all of it as well, we can do that. It can be a short 30-minute, an hour with us just to kind of discuss a bit more in depth all these areas that we've covered. But there's a lot there with MS Teams, and getting that kind of structure in place and getting everyone kind of very familiar with it is a big deal. I've seen also over the companies I've spoken to, sometimes it gets a little bit out of hand because it is such an intuitive tool and there's so many things you can do. I think kind of getting that structure at the beginning really kind of helps provide the value. So please do reach out with us, and we'd be happy to kind of provide some more background, some more support. So thanks for your time, everybody. I really appreciate it. I'll pass it back to you tomorrow.
So thank you all. Thank you, Ali. I'm glad that this was useful to you guys. We're really excited about our webinar series. We've been working really hard to come up with topics that will have value and interest to everyone. I highly recommend you take a look at the upcoming series that will be hosted by Arash on Power Automate and by Rafe on Power Apps, because I think that those will get you really far as well. So thank you all. Have a great day. Look for our email in the next couple hours, and we'll send out a link to the recording of this session. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.